All right. As a certain layman somewhere on the internet loves to say, hello, everybody, even if you don't have a body. Today, I have the opportunity to speak with Swami Rahasya, or if he would forgive me my Englishness, Master Mystery, alternatively, Master Secret, Private, or Hidden, as Google would have it. But who doesn't love alliteration? If such a thing as an all-pervading yes without a no titillates your interest, if you are hardcore, as you very well might be, clicking on this. So I'm implying that you might be hardcore if you've already clicked on this. Then I think that Swami is and has been working at a number of intersections that would be of interest to you. So he has a quote from the website of the Advait Tantra School, a school that he helps to steward. It's funny how I haven't been able to locate your position in the school, but here's the quote. Tantra is the roughest, rockiest, and unquestionably, excuse me, the most horrible of spiritual paths. It is not a journey for the faint-hearted, the weak-minded, or the emotionally troubled. It presents serious difficulties even to the heroic. It is as harsh as the truths of life themselves. So that's from the Rocky Horror Tantra Book written by Swami. Swami dutifully apologizes to everyone that reads his book. He also provides a helpful analogy between the practice of martial arts and the practice of Tantra, such that a wider culture might understand a bit better the kind of work and context he is involved in. In South Africa, and I suppose globally, we inherit cultures of violence and complicated attitudes, to say the least, around sex and the body. I anticipate that Swami Rahasya is a well of important information and insight with regards to these domains. So before we get going, hello Swami, thank you for making the time to meet and welcome to the Holy Cow. Are you there? You might be on
Oh,
mute.
yeah, Daniel. So,
It's the hidden.
yeah.
Sure.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. And you've got to be the first person that Googled what that name I was given so long ago means. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yes. Yes. Uh, um, it was given to me by you might have heard of Osho,
Hmm.
one. There's a lovely hit piece on his. Well, it's not a hit piece on his work. It's kind of a hit piece on the palace politics around him on Netflix called
Hmm.
Wild Wild Country. That's worth a look.
Hmm.
I mean, what they can't cover up is everyone there had an awesome time.
Yeah.
Cover up is with the incredibly convoluted palace politics and all sorts of Indian style election manipulation stuff. Um, Nobody died.
Sure, sure. It's I get the feeling you have an interest in that kind of direction, like the tantric version of a monastery was.
Well, Osho was a wide, what do you call it, a big boat teacher, a kind of something for everyone at all
Mm,
levels kind of teacher.
mm,
Um, and I got very involved around a commune of his. There was a commune in Johannesburg, quite a nice little one. And back then, we're talking the days of full conscription and everything else.
mm.
Um, and what I loved about it is the guys were strong in their practice. You had to be strong in your practice to go overseas, back then to India, later to America, and get a name change, come back wearing red robes and wooden beads with a picture of this funny old Indian dude on the on the thing,
Wow.
and uh, and then go into the army or something, you know. Um, and I had a lot of respect for the guys that did that back then. I only officially um, I was never one to join anything I always learned in the mode, what I now recognize is the mode in which Tantra people, as opposed to monastic or spiritual community people, move. We kind of raid everything, move in on some society, learn their inner secrets in 3 months, and, then either leave or, back in history, some of that flavor, like Aleister Crowley, he'd just take over.
Mm, sure.
But that kind of approach of learning always being the interloper. So it was the
Yeah.
greatest surprise to me when it's something it's not in the realms of logic, why I eventually, went through their little ritual, got given another name. And I stick to it and keep it because I was a bit of an unusual birth, and I was acquired by people and then legalized into an adoption after being acquired.
Sure.
And they're nice enough people. They raised me in their ways, and great. But I always knew I'm not really theirs.
Sure. Yeah.
And as far as names go, I prefer the one Usher gave me anyway. So it sticks.
Mm,
Yeah.
sure. Interloping, adoption. That's yeah. And I get it. I get a real sense of like quite an embodied hardness almost of the context of growing up, like in South Africa at that time, at least from what I can kind of assume or project backwards. And I mean, just the fact of military conscription, um, the words like embodied and harder come to mind. It's just a tougher context, more commitment to gather your things and head off to India um, and then I guess maybe like a bit tougher in terms of the reception, prickliness of people in terms of coming back wearing funny colored robes, engaged in different practices, and I think it would have a very interesting perspective on how that kind of dynamic has changed through time. Am I kind of right in the assumption of how it was? And
Oh, sure. And it's not even just that movement. It's really it's even bigger than across the whole board of the whole spiritual. It's really all the ways of learning. Things have got much gentler and kinder in recent decades.
mm,
Uh, the Buddha predicted 2,500 years ago that what was going to happen with humanity was they were going to carry on living to a less and less maturity, in a sense. And that by our times, as a part of consequence of that, that he talked about the teacher in our times, 2,500 years after him, being Maitreya. Now, a lot of people take that as a name. There's been, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of people who've gone, I'm Maitreya, But Maitreya means
yeah,
the friend, and it's more a description of the archetype, the change of the shape of a thing.
yeah,
Teaching had to it. Master tell, you do, etc.
mm,
And Buddha was saying by our times, no, it's not going to be master. It's going to be a friend. Maitreya means the friend.
mm,
Do you
mm,
think of it, if you learn anything, hell, if you learn shooting, as I had lessons from a friend of mine. I live far out in the country. He brought by some guns and insisted I come shooting with him. So we potted targets for a day. It was great fun. But even there, his instruction was so friendly. He didn't slap me on the head once, call me an idiot once. It was nothing like my old martial arts training and that sort of stuff. And
mm,
and if you go learn scuba diving, you're learning life and death immediate skills. But it's a friendly game.
mm,
Done that back in the 70s. Man, it was, very militaristic kind of master order, you do kind of instruction.
yeah, yeah,
And so that friendliness, that's the main thing that's changed in that organization and plenty others, and sure, my own teaching too. Although I only, for me, it was already, my master was, you could say, transitional between being master and friend,
mm,
transitional between patriarchs in charge and the feminine overview kind of guiding things.
yeah,
And that's probably why you don't really quickly find a way, find a kind of title for me or something in the school.
mm, mm,
I'm a founder of it. Okay, those who teach are my first students, and then students they've taught. And, I've checked in kind of over the last couple of generations.
Mm,
And even if you looked at the Facebook group, Advait Tantra School Facebook group, you'll see all sorts of things advertised.
mm.
You probably won't see one from Advait Tantra School. They do some event or something. Yeah, I'll brand it
Yeah,
once. But these women I work with, mainly it's women, they're not here to parrot me or teach something I give them.
yeah,
What I do with them is I help them to the teaching they're here to bring. Sometimes I might not even like it that much. Mostly I like it, but, I don't have to. And you'll see other teachers advertise there and so on because, they like them. So they'll invite them by and do a group. Good. You know,
yeah,
um, what my master said about that, he said there has to be a lot of teachers at all sorts of levels because there's a lot of people at all sorts of inclinations and all sorts of levels.
mm,
Um,
mm.
I mean, if you visit Osho's ashram, the Osho Commune International out there in Pune, still going, you can take classes in stuff that makes my hair stand on end, like Zennis. I kid you not. Find your Zen flow in the game of tennis. Okay. But I'm not mocking it, I get it. For someone that's going to be as deep as some of my martial arts training was for me,
Mm.
finding something of yourself in a moment where time goes funny and things happen. And, I get it. You can do that in Zenith as well. Okay.
I really appreciate that. There's so much there that so the friendship as this like a change in the mode or the form of teaching. I
Mm,
really appreciate this idea, and I find myself thinking a lot like in terms of a community of loving fellowship and what it means to um participate in that or be in that. Because it's kind of like the I am Jesus or the I am Buddha move has been taken, and we beyond that. So we need to think um a different style, I guess. And I think that's part of what's been so intriguing, taking a look at your work and a look at the Advait Tantra School, is it's really embodying these dynamics in a unique way. And it's tricky because of the kind of, I guess, like the logic of the market or of capital. Like it's not necessarily the best marketing strategy to not um link everyone into that same body. But this is that I assume this is this new new way of the masculine and the feminine coming together. Like the patriarchy is losing its grip or its manner or its mode of doing things, of conducting itself. This is that that intersection that was provoked by chapter 7 of your book where you give that vision um of the first patriarch. Uh, it's this terrain that has got me really thinking in. I heard you mention that this story itself, um the vision of the first patriarch, it kind of intruded on your creative process in writing the book. Would you mind saying a bit about that or?
oh, sure. I mean, some writing is very mechanical, especially towards the end of that book, Swami's notes, no nice stories, here we go, just the facts, handle it or not, like that kind of approach.
Mm,
And some of the stories, I constructed. I mean, they're all true-ish in the sense of they're often compounds out of two or three people's experiences, that sort of thing. But that particular one, that particular story, I had a how to say, a notion of addressing one. I know you're not going to like this, but I'm going to be sleeping all tomorrow because I can feel, the writings come, why I'm not an author is, for me, it's a rare thing, and it's a rare thing that I want to kind of greet that arising notion, like let it in and let it come to some manifestation. I think I heard of, what was it, Tom Waits driving along the highway, an idea comes from, you know, I often feel like that about an idea. Someone else can take it. I know it's not response, you know, but that particular one, that kind of got me at about 11 o'clock at night. And by the time dawn came up, it was down, the bones of it, you know, just needed some logic and cleaning up here and there. But such things come from, the Greeks put it best, it comes from the muse, you know. It's and it was a bit of a torture for me. I didn't enjoy writing that, and I didn't enjoy working with it afterwards, you know. It's a horrible story, but I think it's one that Tantra people are best be aware of, because the whole masculine feminine dance and dynamic is very core to the question of a tantrika. I mean, there are some schools where it's the only deal, you know. It can, but that's again a male mind thing, making a school about a single focus. You know, for me, it's about supporting the feminine to overview, and the time of transition is really, from my perspective, patriarchy's always been a pretense, in a sense. You know, you ask any great patriarch in history, especially the great patriarchs, the commoners don't know, but the Winston Churchills know. You know, Winston Churchill, what will women be running the world by the year 2000? Yes, they'll still be at it. You know, he knew he was the mind job of a woman. In his case, Lady Randolph Churchill. I know I'm the mind job of a woman. And everyone, I mean, even David Koresh, you know, you don't have to dig deep in his story, you'll see. Pretty strong theological woman behind him, too. You know, that we get set up, and, you know, the illusion is, oh, us men are running the show. We did for a while because it was kind of delegated to us. But if you look at, when I talk about, people talk about, oh, is patriarchy in trouble? Is it going to, I say, we've got the stink of its rotting corpse. That's all that's left. It's so dead. If you want to know when it died, very easy. It's when boys stopped wearing high heels, tight hosen to show a well-turned calf, you know, bouffant hair, makeup that can be seen across the street. Because that used to be what the trouble, that great effort a young man used to go through at the top of culture to be noticeable, to be present in society, to be noticed. You know, it took a certain degree of what Jordan Peterson would call competence to put together such a look. You know, and therefore that was an indicator to the men who were going to mentor you. You know, maybe there was sometimes some pederastic stuff too, but by no means always. But you still wanted, you didn't want a junior who couldn't turn himself out magnificently. Couldn't look, you know, stunning. And we stopped doing that. We put that all on the woman. That was where we lost it. You look at the same point in time, we stopped leading our own battles. People that had a war to fight used to have to physically themselves be there with their troops. They didn't have to be in the front. They could have big guys all around them, but they had to be there. You know, the British royal family sort of keeps that going, sending Andrew to fly helicopters in the Falklands War. That sort of thing. The tradition still, but it's not really respected anymore. You know, it doesn't happen. And that meant that our rogue alphas, the guys too quick to get into destruction and violence, didn't get killed off. The other thing that killed off the worst, because patriarchy trimmed its worst, was the ritual of dueling. We lost that round about the same time. It became a sport with wax bullets and, you know, blunted points and protective gear. It became a sport. We no longer got rid of the emotionally, what would you call them, low EQ rogue alphas of the culture. We used to cull them quite solidly. I mean, generally, don't forget, both participants in a duel generally died.
Mm.
Maybe 3 weeks later of the infection, but no antibiotics.
Yeah.
And so that was what sort of policed the principles of patriarchy and kept a tension between principle and profit. And that, you could say, was really like the ligaments holding the body of it together.
Mm.
And you notice now we live in a world where what happened was, I'm not judging it, I'm just saying what happened, was the shopkeeper class got admitted to polite society. Bankers, financiers, people of shopkeeper ethics. And the
Mm.
shopkeeper only has one ethic: is put that thumb on the scale and max your profits. That's it. And you might notice we have a world now where if you ever do see any principle or ethic in play, the ethical principle in play is called profit. That's it. Nothing deeper. And that's really a symptom of patriarchy having thoroughly ended. Now, the
Mm.
feminine rising, we'd all love. I hope we'd all love a great benevolent feminine overview, giving us masculines our linear direction to go do our linear thing as we love, and so on. But
Mm.
of course, same as with the individual women I work with, I say to them, yes, I know you want to be in your power. You want to be beautiful and elegant in the use of your power. Well, great. If you're going to get beautiful and elegant in the use of your power, it starts with being willing to be powerful in nasty ways, in elegant ways, crude ways, and then you can refine it. But if you don't, and so the rising feminine we have on the planet, you could say the whole corona thing for me, that was, I mean, the downsides we don't even have to talk about, but on the upsides, it doesn't matter. I don't care how much bullshit needed to be involved. I don't care. First time ever, the whole planet unified around a concern.
Mm. Mm.
That is worth so much. That
Mm.
is a huge, huge marker, historical marker that
Mm.
happened there.
Mm.
And to me, my vision of the arising feminine power in the world is she's kind of like a 15 years old mother. I ain't got a clue. And so you think of it, the first big directives from the global feminine, the arising global feminine power, the first directives were what? Stop crowding each other, wash your hands, and, cover up if you're going to cough. Okay? Have we had a cutoff?
Uh, I'm. Seems mine's
Hey,
unstable.
tell me if we're back.
Am I coming through?
Oh,
Uh,
we are back.
okay. Am I
All
coming
right,
through?
now you are.
I think it pinged
Yeah,
my
I'm
one.
hearing you fine.
Okay.
Hearing you fine. Yeah.
I'm just gonna.
All right. Stop
There we go.
contemplating.
There we go. A slight technical something. There was one moment while you were speaking. That's it kind of was a crucial moment that it went out. But otherwise, I'm with you, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the image of the power is funny in the sense that like the most dangerous power is that power that you can't identify, and I kind of relate to the feminine a little bit like that. It always surprises me when I recognize the power that has been um, the reality of the power that's been working that's
Mm,
managed to kind of um, conceal itself. So it was a humorous image in terms of your assessment of the like a global movement. So that you say a 15-year-old mother. Um, um, yeah, there's a youth and there's like a thrashing out, and I think this is cause uh for the conversation too. I'm really trying to grapple with this kind of dynamic. Um, maybe I can ground it in like a personal thing, and then you let me know if I'm yeah how I'm sitting with material, I guess. Um, if you'd be open to that.
Sure.
So I encountered a lady a few years ago who really embodied this sense of an all-pervading yes, that was just a yes without a no. And it was, I'm taking that as to be um, a goal almost in the tantric context. Um, and it was unsettling for a lot of people, for the community immediately around her. Um, but the nature of my relating with her was transformative, deeply. So there's because I try and think sometimes in terms of how I can meet the world with whatever work I'm posturing myself to do. I'm in this dynamic of the marketing, of the framing, and so like is it therapeutic? Is it counseling? And I kind of want to not be involved in that. So the context almost it's like seeking to negate itself so that it can be like a fresh context. But then it's hard to imagine how that kind of thing is uh advertised. So when I reached out to you, it was I felt a bunch of resonance. There was a part of the reasoning for the holy and the holy cow is this that kind of resonance that you're sharing in terms of how the story or the vision of the first patriarch came. It's this commitment to that kind of resonance, I think, to holes in things that don't quite fit properly or don't seem to be appropriate or so I invited you and you were very willing and it's deeply appreciated. But then I was kind of left in uh the recognition of like a very open yes being said. Now immediately I'm like in contact with myself. Now I'm reaching for a structure or like a um how to go about it, like what question to pose, what direction to take the interaction. Um, so in terms of linking this into the vision, it's almost a status of myth, I think. The myth of the first patriarch might be, I think it needs to be taken very seriously. Um, is that the differentiation of or the coming out from under the feminine rule of the male was in a no saying. It was the man saying no, giving a strong no. That's my reading at least. That's I'm with the material. So the uh before I hand it back to you, it's this kind of space. It's this practice where there's this holding up and this aspiring towards an all-pervading yes, and then there's this grappling with the masculine um no, and that's the terrain. I'm deeply curious what you think around that.
Ah, nice to identify with the guy. I mean, uh, I think just basically to describe that story a little bit,
Yeah,
um,
thank you.
for those who are not going to get around to it. The first patriarch is a story a fellow encounters in a vision. So I'm distancing it from, you could say, historicity a bit, although I've checked it out with anthropologists and historians since, and they tell me, if anything, I could have written the woman nastier. But the guy's had his life ruled by the feminine all the time. He looks very set up to rebel against it. He makes perhaps the first really independent decision he's ever made, which is to get the hell out of this whole scenario, get out of the women's households. He's a hunter, so he knows the wild. He knows there's another world out there. There's another way of being. And of course, he thinks it's all his idea. Spoilers slightly, but after he makes his escape and his first morning of freedom, and the women are waiting for him there with a picnic to explain to him how it now is. And have we broken up again?
No, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. Unless I'm not coming through. Are you hearing me?
You had me there, and then the screen froze, so I shut up.
Ah,
Anyway, I was, it should cut reasonably together. So I was just giving an outline of the first patriarch story.
yeah, yeah.
This guy deciding to now escape from the whole feminine dominated zone, and then discovering the women are waiting for him with a picnic. And they explain to him, no, they want him to do this. And I've had several women, some of a feminist inclination, saying, really? And I say, come on, do you really think a man could dream up patriarchy? Really? That would have to be a woman.
Yeah.
And as I say, Churchill and so on acknowledging the women have always run us. If you think Alexander the Great was something, well, check out his mommy. Without her, no him, guaranteed, guaranteed. And it's always thus. They have always had the power. It's just a fact. And where men, I see young men now, especially getting, very sort of antsy about it, feeling the quality of feminine power rising. I mean, the instructions we've had from the feminine, very basic stuff: wash your hands, don't crowd each other, etc. Even now, don't mock others if they're different from you. If someone decides he's a girl, well, he can be a girl, and vice versa, and so on. It's very, very mommy, very, very kindergarten, very, very, the management of the planet at the moment. And the background, the thing I was talking about earlier of Buddha, his prediction of the immaturity of our times, he actually said by our time, people will get married at the maturity of a 7-year-old. They'll get divorced, or not divorced, they'll die at the maturity of a 10-year-old. And that is typical for all domesticated species. And he saw that trend. And it's not a bad thing. You can't expect a rising feminine power to take on teenagers.
Mm.
You can't expect to give a couple of teenagers to a house to a woman and say, good, raise them into something. She can't do anything with teenagers. She needs children. And
Sure.
this background immaturity of the planet, if you accept that humanity has to become kind of like a child for the feminine power to raise it, doesn't mean we won't mature again in the future. I'm talking about the general average. Tantrikas don't get an exception. We have to go through those steps anyway. But the general background culture doesn't have to.
Mm.
That changes things of therapy and, working with people with traumas and troubles and so on as well. Because if they're of the regular flavor of the general average sort of energy people, then they're going to die putting away their fear of death as they die. There's not much point in getting them to address all the stuff they put away for later through their childhood and get it all experienced up to date, because that's what maturation consists of.
Mm.
They're not going to. In a way, you just have to give them ways to stay children. Suppressive techniques to bypass their trauma, bypass those things, rather than confronting their feelings about angry daddy, which get triggered every time the boss comes to them. See the boss with a clown face. So it triggers their laughing. So they don't have to go into that, because most people these days, they don't have to go into that.
Mm.
The seekers do, the tantrikas do, the serious seekers, they have to. But the regular person doesn't have to. and it's not really compassionate to push them into it.
Mm.
Hence, my book doesn't only get no advertising. It's going to have to change cover and so on recently, because I was silly enough to go and ask for copyright permissions,
Mm.
and I don't feel like arguing the point. Richard O'Brien doesn't want it. Fair enough, we take it down. But for me, it was all in the fair use zone, but it's not about arguing that. I'm happy to take it down, but the cover, the title, was designed to turn off those readers who judge a book by its cover. I don't
Mm.
want them reading. I've had, generally speaking, it's only really circulated and been around my little school. And I wouldn't even know how many of the people I work with have read it. I'd guess maybe about half.
Mm.
It's for me, it's not about, how to say, as a teacher, one has to take an attitude. Some take the attitude of, well, if I reach several thousand people in this lifetime, I've been a good teacher. And I've worked with some of the teachers in this school. Dear Shakti Milan was very much of that attitude, loved scale, loved efficiency.
Mm.
No, if I reach the right three entire time of teaching,
Mm.
then that suits, that to me, that's success. I mean, and the other end is in terms of guidance from the feminine in the school. I'll get back to the first patriarchy just now, but
Mm.
I only teach because the women insist. My first 3-4 students came almost as a gang and insisted. And I was of an attitude, well, I've had a lovely path. And at that point, it was 20 odd years ago, but I had come to the point where the journey of maturation that sexuality was complete in me. It had done its function. I was, you could say, up to date with life. I no longer had eroticisms making me fascinated about this or that or the other, or very interested.
Mm.
There's a difference between having a capacity for pleasure, even a considerable capacity, and having a desire that needs to go and get some.
Mm.
And so all my interactions with women since then have been driven on their eros, their direction, their lessons, their learning. And you could say, in a way, I had a little bit of a contract to support a few women to their power.
Mm.
But the expression would be that I got fucked by the fine print, because they come into their power, and some of them are of the level of power in the Tibetan language. They call that the dakini,
Mm.
a woman who's really connected through to her divine nature, who can use those energies very deliberately, very consciously, very strategically.
Wow. Mm.
And it sounds like you met such a woman, or budding one on the way to that, at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, then they're actually, in terms of the Tantra archetypes, they are the authority. And they're the ones who said to me, be more open with your teaching. And I said, well, I can be open to an extent, but there's a definite limit. I'm not going to teach women that this will just be disturbing to them, or an unreasonable level of challenge.
Mm.
And but under their direction, I have taught. And the sort of loophole I'm enjoying now at the moment, I wonder who's going to watch this, is the last 7 years I've been only teaching the most insistent of students. They have to be insistent to the point they have to track me down, they have to find out which mountain I'm on and get here. And sure, they can just take a few messages and I'll give but I don't give a map spot, I give directions, things like that. And 7 years I've been building a retreat center for the work, and it's going well. But the original idea was 3 months to build an Africa burn style camp. But it turns out, no, on the mountains with the Cape winds and all that, no, you need to build proper.
Sure.
So, uh, so I'm still doing that. But so that means I don't teach that much, few Zoom sessions, and occasionally someone comes out here for a week or two.
Mm.
But it's still at the direction of the feminine, you know.
Mm.
They want this place, they want to make it. Okay, I get on and make it. Um, a lot of guys get worried talking around this sort of male-female power dynamic. Miss the juiciness for the masculine.
Mm.
You know, for the masculine energy, there is nothing so delightful as being directed to do a thing you do well, something you've got a strong one-pointed focus with, and to do it and have that almost over your shoulder quality of guidance that you can just plow ahead and give max energy. You can just go for it because you don't have to guess yourself about, oh, is it the right way, or tweak, because the overview is going to nudge you. The overview is going to tell you, you know, a little more of this, a little less of that, etc.
Mm.
And you're not going to end up in the situation where you plowed ahead on your one-pointed focus, like, say, many husbands, you know, they get the idea making money is the most important thing. Then they stop 20 years later, and, you know, their wife doesn't know them, their kids don't know them, and they say, but I, you know, and they say, yeah, well, you know, you could have stopped doing that 10 years ago, we had enough. But he just carried on. You know, like, for us to be able to do that with overview. But overview is watching us. The feminine, if it's our own feminine aspect, we have our own overview. But if lacking that, or in the developing of that, have a woman give it to you. And it might even be sometimes, here, do this, and you go, that makes no sense. But okay, do it anyway. And maybe it makes sense on some level you were missing. Or maybe it makes no sense. Good. Then the dear woman with her overview, she gets a lesson in how to refine that overview. You know, but that's really the cooperation. If you manage that internally, if you can find your own overview quality, which I prefer in language to feminine, because it's not about, as soon as you say feminine, people think girly. No. Girly is, we all have to step from the levels. We're all a bit girly when we're little. Then we get to the power of the boy. Then we get to the power of the masculine, the linear one-pointed focus. And women are trained in that too. And that's a beautiful thing. It's been harsh on them, but that schooling, that mind training in being male in your thinking, male in your logic, male in your ways, means that this time round, the feminine is really qualified to hold overview and guide us, because the feminine knows the masculine linear way. You know, women have shown up, you know, who gets degrees quicker than men? Women. Who gets the mentorship in the biggest positions of power in corporations, etc. It's the women dressed up like the boys used to get their mentors. You know, it's happening. So back to first Patriarch, the stories of this first guy that thinks he's going to break with the feminine and go his own way and do things in a man way. And he finds out the women want him to. And they've set him up proper. They're even giving him a few women who are already very eroticized to that kind of lifestyle. And out of the pressures of that culture, you know, those are the rebellious women, the women who want a man to overwhelm them and take them and, you know, thoroughly kind of address the girl eroticisms and stay in them. And that's what we've had for a few thousand years. And the point was, if you look at the use the feminine used to have for the masculine, it wasn't that much. It was basically compete in sports so we can decide who's the best ones to breed with. And, oh yeah, protect us from the guys who are not loyal to us and don't get that women rule. And that was about it. But you look, given our head, given free rein to make a thorough mess of everything, we have to admit.
Yeah.
But amidst the thorough mess, women said to me, "Oh, I'm so glad now the feminists taking over, or we can do away with war." And I said to them, "Wait, think a little. Really? You don't like your international instant Facebook communications? You don't like that? Oh, no, I love that stuff. You don't get there without war. You like your digital camera? You don't,
Mm,
we develop that sort of thing through war. It's the competition of war. That's the biggest driver of technology, second only to making sex toys. If you look, the first stone dildo and the first stone spear appeared about the same time. That's technology.
mm,
And I think, the women, the feminine that has overview, they're not against war. They see its necessity. On the slightly grim end, you look who's dying in wars of the last few decades. It's all the holdout relics of patriarchal honor culture that, again, you can't expect the feminine to work with that stuff. And that's who's dying in the wars. Those are the cultures currently being exterminated, currently being replaced, and all that. And you could take an immediate political view on whether you like it or not, or want to oppose it, and so on and so on. For me, I see political trends and movements more in the sense of the weather, and I've got more control over the weather. So it's just about environment.
mm,
And it's not really even that some environment's preferable to some other. I mean, people say to me, "Oh, being a tantrika, oh, you must be very in favor of all this, the new sexual liberation and everything else." And yeah, it's nice that, I don't feel I'm at risk of being prosecuted as what do they call it in England back in the day? Incorrigible rogue. It was actually a crime, for talking as I do and so on. I appreciate the breaks in the culture. I appreciate that I can put a little book out and things like that. I appreciate it.
mm,
But I also understand that, and having lived in the old South Africa, it's really clear, is that if you have a background that's draconian, totalitarian, if you're living under the Calvinist Taliban or the Islamic Taliban or whatever, if you've got that kind of social control and policing, everything, boy, it really is good for the seekers. I'm not talking about just the tantrikas, the monastic spiritual community inclined ones. It's good for them too, because it forces you to distinguish, at that level, making the shift from the worldly to the spiritual. It's clear what the shift is. You have to make it, If the culture gets too nice and comfortable, you'll get your rights for everything and you'll get tolerance for everything. No bulls required anymore. And you lose something, you know.
mm.
I'm never going to be in favor of totalitarians, but they do bring a certain sincerity to their opposition.
I really appreciate that last point. Um, I mean, uh, in much of what you said now. I'm hearing you in terms of this, like the function of eroticism being basically maturational. That which like lures you, um, is the place or the seed where your growth is going to happen. So the allowance of that. So then, in context where there are or there is a degree of repression, oppression, some kind of putting down, it can almost refine that eroticism. Like it can require you to meet it. It can become undeniable, and its conflict or its opposition with the rule of the social sphere that one is in, then like requires that you work through that opposition or that tension. And so it produces, like you said, sincerity, like a sincerity quest, of looking, of practicing. Um, am is Are you thinking eroticism in this way, in terms of um its functionality being within the context of development or growth, maturation? And then um I guess I'm wondering, um I'm wondering how you're mapping that kind of thing, how you mapping um maturation, besides the, yeah.
Mm. All right. Well, to tell it very simply, you could say we are here. Okay, we, as the 90 those that are here with the burning question, that have the energy in life to actually, take it beyond a hobby and that sort of thing, right? Mm, I don't know if we're stopped or
I can
you've
hear you.
frozen again.
Yeah,
Tell me when we're back.
I'm here. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
great. Um, all right. So you could say that the rule for such as us is we must experience every, you could say, frame of the movie that is our lives. So, but some bits are a bit overwhelming, and so you don't look. Some bits of life coming our way, just being too much to feel in fullness. It can be lovely things. It can be so much love for one of the parents that is just overwhelming. It can also be terror at the parents. And it's often terror, it's often fear, it's often what we'd call negative and traumatic stuff. And what happens is everything that we cannot experience in fullness is put away for later, very much put away in the body, actually. And then when 14, 13, 14, 11, whatever, when puberty hits, we're supposed to put away for later all through childhood. I mean, you cannot, how to say, a child's capacity is not large. It's a very rare child who can experience their life fully all the time. Plenty bits are going to be way too much, and you kind of blank. You'll have occasional memories from childhood when something was too much and we shut it off. Now puberty comes, and puberty is the point at which we start maturing. Maturing means catching up on everything we put away for later so that we are up to date, because all the experiences we have make us. And when we're up to date, then we're fully present. We're able to engage with the world on a whole other level. We're present with it and responding to it, as opposed to choking back 10,000 things trying to jump up within us. And that point of maturation is produced by the system, we call it the subconscious mind, is in charge of it. It's got the backlog of feelings that need to be addressed, that need to be felt, because it's just the feeling of it. You don't need the memory of it. You don't, memories and things and psychotherapy probing into is all useful for getting to the feelings, but the feelings are the thing. So what's supposed to happen in nature is subconscious mind is in charge of getting these feelings felt. Its advantage over you is that it's a good click or two cleverer than you. And the other advantage it has its power. Its power is it generates your desires.
Mm.
So the way this plays out is Johnny's been locked in his room, put in his room, often by mommy, who then goes and makes love to daddy or whatever, or goes as a fight with daddy, but he's not allowed. He's excluded. He's cut off from all the love with mommy and everything, and put in his room and the door's closed. And he's got lots of feelings put away for later about that. He just couldn't feel it in fullness, that being isolated, being alone, being separated from the woman he was born to, and agony, agony. So then what happens to Johnny at 14 years old is his desire kicks in. and he starts running around making inappropriate sexual advance after inappropriate sexual advance at everything, women from girls to grannies. And hell, he even sort of looks at the chickens and talks to the ducks, and they all reject him. And every night after a day of this, he goes home and he weeps his little heart out, and he feels torn and overwhelmed is the big sign that you're on the money. He's overwhelmed because everything put away for later was put away because it was overwhelming. So overwhelming will always be there. And he is overwhelmed and in tears, and he goes through his angers, his hates with the rejection he's getting, and he weeps his little heart out. And eventually, when he's caught up to date on those feelings, well, then he goes out in the world and he doesn't even have the desire to be inappropriate. Now he has desires to maybe connect on other ways. His subconscious sets him up with other desires now to trigger deeper stuff, to find that woman who's going to dominate him to the point where he's really going to feel that thing of being controlled by mommy or whatever he needs to feel. So that the nasty bit is that a lot of people catch on to this, that their desires are going to bring them trouble. A lot, not people I work with generally, but people who are starting out, or the people that my students work with, very often they have to do some work to get in touch with what their desire even is, because there's such a habit of that always brings stuff I want to put away for later. Yeah. And as I said, for 90% of humanity, that is perfectly good. They're not going to be maturing. Hence you can see so many things that used to be fairly well-known stages, you could say, of psychological development are now not stages of development anymore for the 90%. They are lifestyles.
Wow.
And they will often be lifelong lifestyles. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not even age. It's not like people my age are more mature than people your age these days. No. One thing I've given people to have a look at that thing of maturation is go take a nice, just to name a public figure that's accessible to us all, not expressing any liking or disliking in any which way, just because it's available. And I know online you can find videos of Donald Trump giving recent addresses, recent talks, recent debates and things. Look at a bit of that. And then go look at stuff when he was 30. Go look at stuff from what's that now, 40 years ago or something. Yeah. And listen and see that young man and just see his expression, his deportment in an interview, his eyeballs to the camera, his presence. He is so much visibly, clearly more mature at 30 than now. It's a global phenomenon. And as I said, the little bits of the global that resist it, well, that's where all the dying's happening. Sure. But the movement is on. That's what's happening. And so most people are never going to have to even worry about this thing of maturing. And those that do, it's always a bit of a curse, because especially these days, I have to tell a lot of people, it is hard to soar like an eagle when you're surrounded by a bunch of turkeys. But it's not the turkey's fault. And the most common error of seekers is what I call the anarchist mistake. It's they want to wake up everyone. No, 90%, they cruise at a different level. If we go to the old stats on this maturing thing, because the old stats are there, it's very clear. The 90% of humanity, the people with no spiritual interest, if the community does going to church, they'll do going to church. But that kind of level of involvement, just people living their lives, average bricklayer, average plumber, average shepherd, for them, 50 years of sex life, 50 years of desire, of the subconscious giving them desires to go get their triggers and feel what they need to feel. Okay. And 50 years would do it. So by 65-ish, historically, you could go sit down next to, hell, you know, as I say, a bricklayer, a plumber, a poet, it doesn't matter. At that kind of age, he met you, yeah, now, in the moment. His conversation wasn't colored by his old resentments and by things. He had a maturity. We used to revere age for that very reason.
Mm.
Now, someone on a monastic path, someone as in they've got the level to get into a spiritual community, onto a path, that kind of attitude person, you know, the person who joins the priesthood as opposed to just goes to church, right?
Mm.
They typically took 22 years. So 22 starting at, I don't know, 14, 15, you know, when desire kicks in, they'd be done by 40. And so in the old world, a priest or a head of a spiritual commune or something, at 40-ish, they had that same maturity that the 65-year-old regular guy had.
Mm.
They had it. And the Tantrikas, their journey was expected to be fast. Their stat was 7 years. And Tantrikas, a lot of them started a little bit before the regular age of puberty. I mean, one of the most powerful dakinis I came across in my learning, oh, wonderful woman. She had started her journey at 11. I said, 11, but I mean, even if you were mature, how the hell did you arrange that?
Mm.
She said, I blackmailed the right friend of my father into it. I said, really? You know, you got a 40-year-old man? You know, and she said, yeah. At 11, I knew it was my path and I must start, and he's the right one to start with.
Yeah.
And, she literally blackmailed him into it. You know, I will tell my father terrible things if you don't.
Yeah.
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 And faced him with the option of, you know, do you really prefer I just walk down to the nearest bar and, you know, go home with whoever wants me? Because that's the other option at 11 years old.
Ah.
You know, in the
Yeah.
world, we look at that. That was not in the modern world. When I met her, she was 61 years old. And she hadn't had any urge for anything engaging in it. You know, her sexual journey to the absolute heights of it was finished when she was 50-ish.
Sure.
And yeah, special woman. But that's old world tantrikas, man. Some of them started ridiculously young. So, but anyways, even at 14, 16, 17, whatever, you know, more normal kind of age, the tantrikas are still going to be finished early
Mm.
in terms of that, in terms of their erotic journey. And that was the old world stats. Now, these days, what blows me away constantly with my students is when they manage a very tricky shift, the shift from being basically against your subconscious and wary of its desires to what you were talking about, giving into the yes. Of, well, the desires there, okay, I can even see the trouble, but the desire's there, so I'm going there. And then having the disaster happen, having, oh my, all big piles of stuff triggered, and being willing to go, oh, goody, here I get to be overwhelmed again.
Yeah.
And actually catching up on those feelings. Now, it's the trickiest thing. It's so counter sort of every instinct. It's like, you know, getting through dentistry by yielding to the pain as opposed to tightening up against it. You know, it's going with it. But those who make that shift, the pace at which they catch up to what you would call their natural chronological kind of maturity level and then cruise beyond, it is stunning. It goes so fast. And my biggest moments of envy have been, say, helping someone with her feelings about being vulnerable and about men by making her lie on a table naked, and now I touch her, poor darling. And so she's being triggered into zones of discomfort and all sorts of things she put away for later. I don't even need to know the details. She doesn't even need to catch on the details, but it's being felt. And sometimes afterwards, as I say, envy for me has been there, someone in 2 hours passed through, and I could see now as clear of a department of stuff that if I think of my equivalent, what I had to go through, oh, that was like 4 years of lifestyle immersion in a
Mm.
very uncomfortable relationship scenario to get through the same. Because when I got through it, I was getting through to it on the level of I was absolutely resistant. I was at least, but my chi was such that I could not deny my desire. And so I got to catch up on what I had put away for later. And for me, my own view was I was re-traumatizing myself and going through all sorts of terrible agonies, but not really. I was just feeling what needed to be felt. And the discomfort and the time it took was there because I was so resistant.
Mm.
Yeah. So my pace, I didn't crack a tantric pace, man. My journey was more like 22 years, more or less what you'd expect from a monk. So and that brought me to what really I call my brag and my shame in this work. Is the brag is, and I'm unusual among men, and uh, touch wood of whatever sort. If you look at males that teach anything related to the kind of stuff I teach, teaching women around things of their sexuality and so on, they tend to get me to kind of quite a lot and quite hard, at least at the beginning of their teachings. A lot of them, they learn.
Mm.
But for me, that's been remarkably little a problem ever. You know,
Mm.
it's because my brag in this work is that I can engage with women even in working directly with their eroticisms because I've finished my own.
Mm.
I can kind of resonate with what was in my range. Hey, if it's out my range, I can't feel a thing. There's no point. Find someone who can. But and this, I like to think I've got a reasonable range. But if it's in my range, I can resonate with. But when the heat of that drops in her, it drops in me. And in that way, so there's the brag. And the shame, of course, is that there was a long time while I was still on my journey where I could have been useful to quite a few and quite useful teaching around what I did know. And I didn't. I didn't give a shit. I was on my path, me, one pointed focus.
Ah,
So, yeah.
yeah, this image
That,
of the, yeah, sorry.
that dance of learning to align with your desires, learning to accept the trouble. It doesn't even mean you have to go have the unhappy love affair. It means you can see her, you feel the desire, and you even know there's going to be the rejection. You don't even have to go and get the rejection. You just feel it. If the rejection, if just the notion of the rejection can trigger in you, oh my God, there's stuff to do. Good. Get home, feel that.
Yeah.
You know, so often with this dance, people think we do the wildest and kinkiest things in the school. And hey, sometimes it turns out, sometimes some things have to actually go all the way and get fully enacted. Some eros won't move without that. But the vast bulk of it is just being open to what even the notion triggers for you. That's
Mm.
it.
Mm.
So much of it is that. And the Tibetan schools did great without letting their monks anywhere near the girls, just making
Mm.
them meditate on the unavailable goddess. That gets them through so much
Sure.
because they're not denying their desire, they're feeling it, but the desire is doing what the desire will. The desire never brings what you think the desire was. You know, no one ever ends up with a happy, long-term committed relationship. I mean, I was with one woman, monogamous 14 years. At no point did I go, oh, I'm having the dream. I'm having a long-term happy relationship. No, no.
Yeah, the last point there, I think, can save a lot of like stubbed toes. But it's also tricky kind of gauging that the degree to which one can work through the thing um imaginatively or by following that impulse without having to kick the kick the chair or um,
Ah,
yeah, then sure.
we defend it so well. I so often say to people, people tell me, well, in this relationship, and they'll go into some complicated dynamics of what this message meant to them, and then what their response was, and then what they heard from this friend. And out of all the complications, so often I come down to saying, so let's say you're right. If you're right, that means you don't have to feel this, and you could put it away for later. Because that's all the conscious mind is after doing in that zone. Isn't there some way I can, oh, she's a bitch. Okay, I don't have to feel rejected because she's a bitch. Meanwhile, no, the need is actually, even if she wasn't that much of a bitch, if she managed that you've got this rejection, abandons thing coming up, good, good. Go lie on your bed and curl in a little ball and weep. It's finished.
Yeah.
But as I say, not for 90% of people, just for those who have the chi for it. Most people, their energy does not drive them to that. It's quite comfortable to not even know their desire. Quite comfortable.
Yeah, what you were saying there was interesting, like the way that um there comes a point with like voluntary, or it has to become a voluntary thing that's pursued. Like you have to make yourself complicit in the pursuit for
Oh,
maturation. Um and but then you also brought the element of, I think you used Trump as an example of that if you're not growing, there is the risk of like degeneration. There is the risk of like the if you level out at a certain point, it's
well, if you default to the cultural average, if you default to that, well, perfectly good. There's nothing wrong with such a life, you know. But I mean, it's how to say, no one needs to envy the tantrikas. I mean, for all the juicy stuff they get into, they get all the kicking about they deserve. Hmm.
yeah, I appreciate all the kind of the warnings that you put around even with the name of the book, the cover of the book. It's yeah, it does its own work for sure. In that I have a lingering um curiosity. I think it's in the sense of um like you're in a unique position for the information. Um I'm just like besides I'm wondering about your sense of like a how much you've um made a diagnostic of. So there's culture at large, but then there's also in our more immediate context, South Africa, and I keep thinking there's quite important lessons to be learned from what's happened here and what is happening here. So that's part of why this kind of question arises for me, or the curiosity persists. But so the question is like it's around your sense of um like have there been patterns that you've identified, like shorthands, uh, kind of diagnostics that help you relate to, identify tendencies within the culture in relation to, I mean, I get the body, sex, and maybe violence is in there, but within the realm of your work. I'm really interested if there's, yeah, if you've come to anything like that.
The only things around that really are specific to South African context really is, I talked about women having had that training in the masculine from schooling and so on. It just in South Africa, we are spoiled with the most, this is not my phrase, dear Swami Duren, guy that I studied with at one point a little bit. Um, he was rushing around all over the planet, teaching people all over. And I remember a bunch of guys, we got cornered him a bit in South Africa and said, okay, you've been all over the world. Tell us about here. And he said, straight away, first thing off his top of his mind was, boy, you have the most masculine women on the planet. No
Oh,
question. You know, a woman's car breaks down. She just gets out. She just pulls the tire out. She just starts changing it. And you know what? The guys will let her, you know, and actually they'll let her because, you know, she'll bite them if they go near. And there is that quality. I'm talking about obviously the kind of what you'd call the seeker circles, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
the people who are looking for spiritual community or playing with spiritual communities, that kind of thing. In that zone, that's a factor. Apart from that, to that community, that community is kind of transnational and just going through the steps of what you call it individuation. Now, this was just as important in the Hindu context for an old tantrika there as it is in, say, modern Joburg now, is if you are going to individuate, well, all those things that you regard as tribal, you're going to own them personally. You're going to have your own tribe of one. You are going to show you. I encourage people to stay connected with family, stay connected with their culture, even if just on a politeness level, and hopefully better than that. Because the fact is, if you're moving on the path, any path, you are going to go through the steps of individuation. You're going to separate from family, not in a way of not loving them, in a way of not being owned and ruled and controlled by them. You're going to be separate from culture, tribe, etc., etc. So our tribal dynamics, and we've got wonderfully rich, complex stuff in this country and a beautiful diversity of stuff. I've even had some friend of mine fairly high up in the political game. I said to him, "Do you think I'm tolerable here? Can I be tolerated?" And he said, "No, no, no, we like you." And I don't know who's the we to which he's referring. And I find it a bit creepy that they think that he'd give me the idea someone even knows. But okay. And I said, "Why like?" He says, "No, because diversity. You know, you're doing things in a real different way. It helps people not go point fingers at some tribe that does things in a particular different way. And if you go into tribal ways and so on, you know, the variety is huge. And the permission for it here and the acceptance of that. You say, what I'm here for is the practical freedoms.
Mm.
You know, I don't take me as saying expressing here political likes or dislikes, but for me, if you're seeing a thing as being more upside than downside, or more downside than upside, all it means is your view doesn't have sufficient overview. If you don't see a fullness of delights and terrors, you're not seeing much of it.
Mm.
And there's so much in South Africa that for me falls into that category. Like, okay, people don't like it. Our electricity stops at the roads we've got are the roads we've got. And I just drove past a railway from Cape Town up. I promise you can't get a train along it. The railway got flooded and the rails actually kind of disappeared under the mud and stuff like that. You know, people go, oh, but I go, wait a moment. What's our basic scenario in South Africa? We're a resource-rich, population-poor place, typical of the South, and the North, which is overbred to insane levels, that they're 80% of the world's people living on only 1/5 of the resources.
Mm.
They have to raid the resource-rich population, poor places, continually just to eat, just to survive, you know? So there's no option here, but our resources are being raided by the North, and there's nothing we can do about that. You know, you put 8 guys in a room and 8 guys and 2 guys. You give the 2 guys 8 beers. You give the other 8 guys 2 beers between them. We know how that's gonna go. It's just plain organic. Now, given that scenario, our only defense against having our resources stripped is to collapse infrastructure.
Mm.
So when I hear load shedding, I don't weep. Like, okay, it can be inconvenient. I run on my own solar here. I try and beat the city stats. Mostly I do. But it's not a bother to me. I know that's an inconvenience, but if you really want electricity, well, this is Africa. Get your own electricity. You know? and stop pretending to be a bloody third world country. To me, the kind of social changes I'd like to see is, stop protecting the car industry with the stupid law that you need a separate license for a motorcycle, and let everyone get a little scooter and just do it in the traffic. It'll be so much more fluid and so more comfortable, like India used to be in 2000. Now India has got, everyone's in a car, so the traffic just sits. But,
Mm.
especially Joburg, hell, man, everyone on a little bike. But the taxi industry and protecting their interest and so on. Ugh. I mean, we're never going to bring back the business conditions that we see. South Africa used to try and protect that fact that, the North will raid us. They used to protect it by saying, well, if you want to raid us, okay, but you have to finance your company here. You have to be on
Yeah.
our stock exchange. Your directors have to live here 9 months of the year, and we police it. If the local conditions get out of hand, if you don't play your part as a corporate citizen and say we're in a war, your sons are in the army. We don't make our exploiters do that anymore. Well, we can't, because that was the liberation. I mean, they bought themselves a liberation. That was the real liberation, was the liberation from business conditions.
Mm.
I mean, as one fellow put it to me, because 1990, a young executive of, I'm not going to mention the corporation, his kid was at school with me. I was popping around there to fetch my kid. And he was so happy at packing up his house. I said, so what happens now? He says, oh, no, I go to have lunch at the Sloan, get paid in the Great British Pound, and discount the ZIR whenever we like Africa cheaper. Okay, I see. Your Liberation Army did it for you, did they? Well done, boy. So then I see things like us collapsing the roads and so on. The railway I want to see go down is the one that's exporting all our coal and our iron ore. Because there's the giveaway. We don't get to make steel and make cars and sell the cars. No, we must export our coal and our iron ore so that other countries get the business of making the steel. And that's just where we are in the kind of, I mean, the liver in the body has got its arguments about how things look to it, and the kidneys have their arguments about, we're
Yeah.
all organism really. And yeah, we can call this an unfairness or whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. It is what it is.
Mm.
And if you think there's a downside to it, well, the upside is we're making it more difficult to take the resources
Yeah.
because they I mean, I love the ANC because of that lovely old saying, is the government which governs best is the government which governs least. That gives you, me, and everyone else a certain level of practical freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not your freedom, your rights on paper and so on, that's one thing, but the practicalities.
Yeah. Sure. I appreciate that reframe. Yeah, I hadn't thought about service delivery.
Mm.
I hadn't kind of asked or guessed into not saying it's a conscious intention, but like an intention behind that, or the reason for that, or why it's manifesting, or
Oh
it
yeah, it's just Africa's urge to protect a bit of her wealth, man. I
sure
mean,
that
and
yeah.
imagine if we could have found. I mean, well, this is the point. It's all dreams to imagine that we could effectively stop or whatever that process of exploitation. I mean, you can't. The North they've got themselves in a pickle.
Mm.
4/5 of the people sitting on only 1/5 of the resources. I know, I mean, I was fed in my schooling when I was young, all the images of the little white family where they've got the two children and they're well off, and the little black family where they've got 16 children and they're all poor as shit. And I didn't realize the extent, I mean, obviously now it's pretty clear that was just plain straight up projection. It's we've overbred ourselves beyond our resources. We therefore have to steal yours, and we are going to try and keep your population down by telling you that by just projecting that you're the crazy rabbit breeders. Meanwhile, we did that.
Uh,
And
sure.
we ran out of everything, so we need your shit. You know. But again, your shit, it's in the ground, it's gold, it's whatever. I mean, look, gold and diamonds were discovered in this country, and even though First Boer War, the English had their asses handed to them, baby, they came back, and second time round they meant it, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, Second Boer War, they put the whole resisting population, resisting tribe, the Afrikaner tribe, they took them off the land and they put them in not the world's first concentration camps, but it sometimes has that reputation.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that claim.
No,
There was another first. There was another first there.
it wasn't a first. I think there was something similar with the Ottoman Turkish Empire before that the English learned.
Okay. Okay.
And then if you think of the Japanese treatment, everyone was so upset about how the Japanese treated their prisoners of war in the Second World War.
Mm.
Meanwhile, I think it was Akihito, Hirohito's uncle, actually visited South Africa and was shown by the British the method for handling, an enemy population in the
Sure.
Boer War. So he took his model, the Japanese concentration camp was based on the British concentration camp. So,
Yeah.
so yeah. But anyway, Ron, for me, South Africa's politics on that level, we don't really have politics. We're a little outpost, corporate owned zone. It doesn't matter, corporate owned or, think of it, we've been owned by everyone.
Mm.
Now, Spain has owned this place. Uh, Germany's owned this place. France has owned it. Holland's owned it. England's owned it. And now you could say the global money, that now the shopkeeper banking class is in ascendancy. They own it. I mean, it's just a fact. It's not worth, we want to
Mm.
change that situation. Good luck. What do you want? Another Boer War? Good luck. You know, you could say South Africa's dance is we managed to not get treated as ugly as plenty of other countries who get more difficult about their resources.
Mm.
If you're in Nicaragua and you want to stop, you don't want your fruit to just keep disappearing for no money. Or if you're in the Middle East, you don't want your oil to just have to only be sold in dollars or whatever. I mean, well, look what happens to you. You get hammered. I
Mm.
mean, here, at least we managed to not get hammered. We play a good political game in terms of, we had to liberate, we had great conditions of business for our exploiters. We had to give up on that. I mean, that was going to go anyway. So that's gone. But
Mm.
now, at least, infrastructure collapse. I know everyone sees this as such a negative, but I'm sorry, there's an upside. The upside is we might still have some coal in 20 years' time. We might still have some iron. Okay, we're not going to get the gold back. That's gone.
Yeah.
You know.
That's a welcome perspective. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a protection mechanism.
it's organic. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
our stuff is being stripped. Well, let's just be less efficient at it. Is one way of just.
Wow. Yeah.
No, really, think of it. What does it mean? My hair stands on end every time I hear South Africa is becoming more friendly to investors. Because
Mm.
no one invests anything. They're just here to take because we've got the resources and they don't.
Sure.
So a good economy in South Africa means having your resources stripped at high speed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not entirely a positive.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's such a I mean apparently simple inversion, but it hasn't occurred to me. I haven't like used this frame. Um
Oh, it's not stuff that's allowed in the media discussion. If you have any discussion around polite people, sorry, I'm hoping your audience isn't entirely polite people, but
all
if
five of them will be all good. Don't worry.
oh good, no, small's good. But and how to say this, the discussion's framed in terms of what are we going to do about the economy, not in terms of how fast are we going to help the Northerners take our shit.
Yeah.
You can't look it in the eye and state it directly, not in politics. You know, you've got to actually remove the discussion, reframe the discussion so it's got to do with nice, simple symbols that don't bear much on reality. And there we are. Now we can debate the symbols.
Mm.
I mean, I overheard years and years ago, you gather how many years ago by the simple thing, a rand would at that time buy you, I think I think something like 5 rand to get a British pound, something like that back then. And I heard from tantricus get around to the weirdest societies and meetings, but I heard a fellow say, "Oh, you know, we like Africa for 15 to the pound. It's $5 too much." And I said, 15 to the pound, like when? He says, well, you know, if it goes quick, 5 years. If it's slow, 10, you know, round about then. Oh, okay. And I'm not even going to say where I had the discussion or where I believe the planet has run from, but I was amused just watching the occasional bit of economics news and stuff
Mm.
on the TV, watching economists as they fell all over themselves to explain and come up with nice big words about why our rand was not buying £5 anymore. It was now only buying 7. And then, sorry, it was only buying 1. And then it was buying none. You know, how our rand moved until we were 15 to the pound. And it paused there for some years. And, you know, that was the sort of ballpark for a while. And from the same circles, I heard, well, but they like us at 30. And we're around about there now. That was maybe 5 years ago. We're getting close to 30 to the pound now. These things are decided. And
Yeah.
then there'll be a public show, and economists can get themselves degrees and make money talking on TV about the market forces and the blah, 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 and suck their thumbs and, you know, use lies, damned lies, and then statistics, and then, oh my God, models. You know, it's just levels of bullshit. To go deeper. But it's necessary bullshit. Keeps the average person happy and thinking, oh, you know, oh, that's why. No, it's because some guy in a particular club 10 years ago decided, oh, Africa looks a bit expensive. Let's have them cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah. There was I guess it's an interesting lens to begin to think kind of economics and social being or being with one another through, and I guess politics through desire and the manipulation of desire or um I mean just looking at my own life, like the big moments of learning have been recognitions of like the degree to which a desire was leading me or driving things from the back, and like uh it takes a little bit to become to see it for what it is, to see it, oh, it's because there's this intensity towards this thing that I keep uh moving in that direction. Um, so then on the political scale, yeah, it's I think it's a perspective that is coming from a matured eroticism is important, or very valuable. And I guess one value just demonstrated in terms of like just a different perspective on I mean, like why the failure in infrastructure? And it's as you say, it's a very organic view that you just took. You looked at the country as a kind of organism, and then it's like it's a protective mechanism from being pillaged. Um, and then that I think that kind of that body thinking, that thinking in terms of body at different scales. Um, There's something we quite a way in here, so I'm comfortable sharing this now. Um, this a few things have brought it in. I was largely understanding myself from what I understood to be a tantric perspective in terms of the spiritual process or path was in some manner a repossession. That was the goal, to be repossessed into the goddess, the archetype, the power. I love the framing you gave a bit earlier in terms of like a nurturing that a new goddess is taking over or growing or um, it puts it into a kind of into a dynamic that's interesting. So so the um and now I'm sharing I'm sharing a bit of myself with you in terms of story. The was understanding myself in this model of seeking the repossession by the goddess. So one moment in life where I'm being frustrated by these desires that are driving me that I can't quite get a sense of or have a clear view of. So it's a particular moment where I make like a one of those uh, daring prayers to the goddess, like can you show me who you are? Can you show me your reality? Like I want to see. I want to see what it is. Like uh, dumb and courageous at the same time, and coming out of that kind of posture of frustration um, with what I can't see that's driving me. The what I came into as a consequence of that prayer was the body of Christ. Now that, sorry, sorry, sharing. Um, Ciao, Shelly. The the I mean this dynamic is just increasingly um interesting and playful to me because there's this and in the book the a few times your counterpoint is often a conservative Christian frame. And from the stories being told, a lot of the pickup that you're getting are the repressions from that context that are now you're dealing with the how it's presenting or the symptoms of how somebody who's been damaged by a um, too heavy conservatism, and then yeah, so it was marked and obviously, but this is what makes me suspicious. Obviously, the counterpoint is the conservative Christian frame. So when I'm understanding myself more in this in this goddess frame, really trying to get to grips with what the overview power is, or what femininity is, or feminine power. Um, it plants me in the it plants me directly in the Christian frame. Um, and now I'm thinking, and the shape that the Holy Cow has taken now is hoping to be a kind of an interface or bridge for this sort of dynamic. But I'm thinking of this the Maitreya Buddha, or the Buddha of fellowship or friendship. I'm thinking in the lens of um the community of loving fellowship, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit we can share with with one another. Um, and then that becomes the body that in this process of differentiation and individuation that the individual undertakes, and now there's required like a voluntary undertaking of that, including the risk, and it reframes your context, it reframes the thing in which you think you're participating in. So it's not just this relationship, this family, but then that gets separated, differentiated from, and then it becomes this this quest for a container, for containing, and that's the way I was imagining the goddess. I was imagining the goddess as this, like this final um containing, like a final place in which um I could pour out, or be contained, or be repossessed by, or and the looking in or towards institutions hadn't, like the academic institution uh hadn't met that, and so the seeking was like seeking places, context, institutional frames. And I think it's part of why, like, this looking at the Advait Tantra School has been so interesting, because of this sense of like, okay, you were in the founding, you are the founder, were in the founding team. But now the way that it's being driven by the eros of the women that come to you and demand and demand teaching. So just like the allowing myself to uh, reflect on and learning from your own uh, enactment, like the framing, the very way that things are set up, that you've set things up and you're interacting with the way things have set up. It's increasingly um, interesting, and it feels novel. It feels like it's at a it feels it's being appropriate to these drives that are not easy to see. And so yeah, that's I'm gonna pass it back to you now. That's my sharing and slight rant, and I thank you for the opportunity to share all of that, and the thank you in terms of the learning that just the existence of that Advait Tantra School has given, and giving a closer look to it, and the book that you wrote, also this honoring creativity and people who are being creative in a context, is also a kind of a drive behind whatever this cowl project is going to be. Let me hand it back.
Yeah. Interesting, you're connecting notions of Christ, Buddha, and so on. Of course, if you go into the Christian theology of it, and partly where I sort of assume, in a sense, generally a sort of generic Christianish background to my readers in the book, and generally that's most of the people I work with is, and most, I mean, boy, one. For me, this teaching, what I've been doing, can only really arise here. For me, it's not some oddity that it's in South Africa. We are halfway between East and West on the trade routes. While I was a youngster running around seeking, I mean, we are richly endowed here with spiritual traditions from all over, and very often in even a more pure, or a clearer, more crystallized form than even their countries of origin. Because when you go to another country and then you hold your waist, baby, you hold your waist because you've got the whole culture around you to hold it against, whereas your own culture can kind of get slack with it. And I mean, here you find everything from Tamils and their rituals to serious Hasidic scholars of the Kabbalah, who, for example, have the instruction at a certain level of learning and age to go outside of patriarchal culture, because they were the only patriarchal culture in the game in their zone when they started up. So everything outside the culture was the older matriarchal way. Just go outside the culture to the women of power and get their lessons. Go and expose yourself to those women. But, do it at like over 42 years old if you're particularly solid in your studies and you seem psychologically very stable, because it's going to shake your world, And they had that instruction. And then in this country, we've got, I mean, Wandakini even fixed her name as Shekinah, because that is the name for the woman of You know, they're out there in the culture. And she really likes, for years, about 10 years, she specifically worked with those guys, with Hasidics, which they're committing all sorts of sin and terms, but at a certain level on their teaching, on their path. This is the thing, all the rules change when you get into, you could say, the secret orders, the inner sanctums, etc. The peculiarity with me, and in a way the stupidity, is that that's directly what I teach, is that stuff, that side of the line, generally. Hence the different perspective and things, and hence the world is much less of a concern than good spiritual people think I should regard it as much more of concern. The modern gender games, to me, it's just beautiful, hey, humanity's playing with being children. Be nice to each other, Yeah, there's going to be some confusion around the boy-girl thing, of course, and so on. And let them be. But you, if you're a seeker on the path, well, you don't get to identify as this or that or the other. Screw that. You get to become what you are. And we all have a fullness of masculine and feminine mind, masculine and feminine capacity. I prefer to call it overview and linearity. And there's not a superiority to overview or linearity, but quite obviously overview should guide the general trends and movements, and linearity should serve that. And it's not a superiority thing, but if you arrange a culture like that, that the feminine, the overview, tends to guide and linearities tend to serve, it will go well. If you manage it in yourself, find your feminine, your overview quality, and find your masculine linearity and serve it. Your overview can tell you you did well or you didn't do well. Your overview can tell you to make adjustments as you go and keep an eye on the bigger picture while you're focused on the target. And in that way, you create friendliness between these aspects of yourself. And one of the huge agendas in Tantra is, there's even some very dangerous techniques for forcing it, if your inner masculine and feminine aspects become clear enough that you really feel them almost like two separate personas in yourself, and then they become not only friendly, they basically, so to speak, make love. They merge in your being, in your body. You become one person. You could say that hemispheres of your brain develop enough crosstalk that it deals with the world as one entity, as opposed to having to split it up to this committee of two. And at that point, gender's not, so you could see that from that perspective, if everyone that's on the path anyway is on that journey, well, yeah, you can identify as male now, female now, you can. But if you're actually on the path, you're going to be finding a fullness of both, and they're going to be coming together. And just about that individuation thing earlier, that thing of separating from culture and so on, because these things, I'm sorry, the culture becomes background like the weather. The politics becomes background like the weather. If you have a preference, you just haven't seen enough, because everything always balances in fullness. If you think this is a bad thing, well, there's just as much of a good thing going on, I assure you. You're sure this is a good thing? I assure you it's got terrors to match. Guaranteed every time. But anyway, on that individuation trip, Jesus was real harsh with it. I mean, apparently he suffers a bit from bad translation. But you know what he said about individuation? John 22, 21, somewhere there, I think. Unless you hate your father, your brother, your mother, your sister, and even your own life, you can't take the path, you can't enter the kingdom, whatever, unless, and it's not hate, it's not be under the power of.
Yeah.
So much of what people want to be concerned with in the world, in terms of the masculine, feminine politics, the country politics, the international politics, and so on and so forth. Hard for me to not it's not I don't take it seriously. I don't take it. I find it hard to take it with some sincerity. Seriousness is out of the question. But it's for me, such forces and such things in play, the personas involved, eh, it really doesn't matter much to me. It's like I can enjoy the movie without knowing which actor and which agent fought with which agent to get in this casting. I couldn't care, really. Like, doesn't make much difference.
Mm.
And, Jesus, you talk about Buddha, but I mean, you know the word Christ, I'm sure, derives from the East anyway. It's, the Krishna consciousness, the Christ consciousness, and it got mixed up and became the Christ thing quite a bit before Jesus in Greece. And the Greeks were far more Krishna orientated and Buddha orientated than most people will ever want to admit. And that's where, for me, the old Greek contribution to the theologies of Christianity, very beautiful, very interesting.
Mm.
And you'll find transcendent and secret teachings at all levels in all things.
Mm.
In certain schools of Christian mysticism, they even have a version almost of Advaita, where Advaita is knowing even all goods or evils or any polar division as one suchness, no matter how much it looks as two. No, it's one. They had a notion of God they called Abraxas. Ever heard of that?
Mm.
Yeah. And Abraxas is the fusion, so to speak, of your positive force and your negative force, or your nice God and your bad God. And it's one God under that kind of conceptual framework. There's um, these things are all over, and it's never about really. If you're a seeker of the monastic flavor, like if you move faster, if there's a group and the group is motivated together by some good teacher, and so the group moves along, and so now you go along well for the ride. If you're that flavor of learner, great. It doesn't, to me, there's not a hell of a lot to choose between the Catholic Church, a Buddhist order, the Krishnas, or take your pick of any, go find the latest Californian gurus that, they'll be fresh, modern, and more sexy probably, but it doesn't really make a difference which of those paths you take, just as long as the group dynamic's good and it suits you and you feel moved with it, great. And if you're the stronger flavor of seeker, if you're the tantric flavor, well, then you're not going to really you're going to take that from everywhere, but you're not going to really join. You're not going to be so much a joiner. You're going to be the interloper. You're going to
Mm.
be gathering lessons. And even here, I mean, I don't try and make a commune here. I make mystery school. It's come here, visit. We work intensively on some stuff for a few days, and then go back to life. Try it out. If what I've taught someone is worthwhile, I find they find out it's worthwhile when they take it back to life and
Mm.
live with it a bit.
Mm.
Up here it's very easy to think you're enlightened, but then go and go with the price of a gas bottle in my local, with my local Bangladeshi store owner. Yeah.
Sure, sure. I'm all out of questions, I think, except except for that, or just that, just repeating a theme, I guess. Like I wonder around the the momentum of in the language you're using, like a monastic community of practice, and
Right.
then the how that affords through different repressions, like the energy for the tantric. And then I wonder around that kind of dynamic. Because if like when the culture seems to open up too much, there can be this like diffusing. But then in as you were sharing, like this there's a loss of a certain sense of sincerity. Um, or the like the fire required to really look after something or seek it. Um, so that's just something I uh, continue to think around and wonder on and try to um try to watch. Yeah.
That's really that's very much the intent of most of the work that you'll find at the school group on Facebook and so on, like Kali's dance stuff, and yeah, you can go along and just dance, but that woman is teaching you things in the dance. She is freeing up and getting at things that you don't even know you've got, and so on. And you could say, inevitably, anything that you see from from a tantra school, archetypally, everything you see from them is their outer teaching. It's going to be preparatory for what
Mm.
their inner teaching is. And at a certain level, that's useful. Some of that's useful to a lot of people, a fairly wide range. And their art, and that's where I don't get involved at that level of teaching much. Occasionally, I'm asked to come and talk something, but usually it's people that have done a group or two and have already individuated a bit from the tribal. You of course get other schools and other movements. Some Americans and come by and they do retreats as well here, and there's visiting teachers and so on. Now some of them, they're part, how to say, they're trying to recover just the sexuality of the culture, which has sort of seen so much repression and so on. And well, they're good for helping people discover a bit of naturalness, get off their resistances. And of course, if then someone's energy is suited to really being a tantrika, well, then they find, okay, now they're really they get behind their desires, they get in alignment with them, and so on. It's very liberating. But for a lot of people, it's they're making spiritual community more. They're bonding them through their sexual rituals more than freeing them. And there's nothing wrong with that for those of the community kind of inclination. Um, but really, that sort of work, I think, approaches what you're really talking about. But not a lot in Joburg, I'm afraid. Um, I don't think there is anyone doing bliss dance there. Yeah, no.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, this yeah, it's a time for me to be with the family at the moment. That's the kind of space that I'm in.
no.
The reason for Joburg. I think there's some contact improv happening somewhere around here. I haven't located it. I haven't looked too hard, but
Another thing that's great is if there's a biodanza class, you
via
know,
Danza.
yeah, biodanza for a couple of hours, whatever it is, an hour or two, once a week or whatever. Bunch of people get together, and they they the thing I used to really appreciate about it, they make a good effort for that hour or two to put their cultural nonsense on hold and feel into what it would be like really to engage people fluidly and so on. And it's sweet if you've got some impulse in that direction. It's not about they will just jump in their cars and buzz home afterwards, or some of them will go out for pizza, but it's about they make that effort for that brief time, appreciate that for that. And yes, they give a hint of, yes, humans can be so much more connected and so much more mutually appreciative and loving and so on. Yes, they can. The dark side of that always is, of course, it gets all factional around the politics of such organizations as well.
Mm.
And it will, because oxytocin, they say the same hormone that goes with love and connection also goes with protect the tribe from the interloper, protect the tribe from
Yeah,
the outside. It's the same hormone,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
I suppose you must there's like almost this element of protecting the kinds of personalities and dispositions that you're talking about because it is the interloping, it is disrupted to their personal lives and there's a lot of friction that can happen when that predisposition dominates or that manner of life is kind of reveals itself as one's natural manner of life and it's a it's complicated, but and this is the thing that's so it it's almost like that's the way in which the fire is delivered or given. Like that's the tutoring, the way that it complicate or the way that it makes hard that manner of thing. Like that's where the fire is given and like the necessary heat almost. So it's like you don't want to do away with that, but then there's also this desire to somehow make it less like bumpy or bruisey or um, yeah.
Sh- Yeah, yeah, very tricky, and that's for me. That's part of actually the friendliness thing
Nice.
is making a decent effort. People think I'm against trauma-informed work or whatever. No, 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 no. Love that stuff. And even for tantrikas, even for people who do really have to face their stuff, that you can gather. I'm not into protecting people from their triggerings. I'm into helping them be aware and ready to feel what they need to feel when it comes.
Hmm.
Yeah. But even there, some techniques of essentially in some degree of avoidance or, setting up the ability to approach cautiously and that kind of thing. Those are useful to tantrikas too, because sometimes the pressure's so much, what's being triggered, and the whole edge, that you need just a bit of a break from it to
Hmm.
find the willingness to go feel it. Like you can be so locked off in defense that you can't move from there. You need some gentle Traeger technique or some gentle trauma release therapy just to blow the top off it. You don't necessarily need Osho's dynamic meditation, which it's like taking a stick of dynamite and sticking it under your depressions and blowing it up.
Sure, sure. Swami, I really appreciate your making the time, um, the generosity with which you've shared, um, the work that you've done. Um, yeah, the feeling before the session was that there was so much that I could ask you. It felt like a little bit overwhelming almost. I wasn't quite sure where to come in on it. Um, so I'm glad that myth or the vision of the first patriarch gave kind of the most I guess the most practical ground grounding grounding for it. Thank you again for sharing as you have, and for making the time for chatting with me. Is there anything you would like to um, conclude with, share, add, any area you feel is worth going into? Um, last notes or anything of that manner?
I don't think anything really particular. Um, no, as my master used to say, I think enough for today. We have rambled all over the place, and
Yeah.
if you feel to have some more questions later with something, or figure, okay, let's dig in on this or that, I'm available. I'm
Uh,
I'm willing to talk. The archetype says, in terms of me, be findable to those who look. So I'm not generally up in people's faces with advertising. I'm not giving, people can look me up if they want to find me.
mm,
And
mm.
don't put links to anything. Uh, Put a link to maybe the Facebook school group if you want, but
Okay.
nothing more than that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate the invitation as well.
To
Um,
meet you, Dad. Yeah.
You too, Swami. Yeah. Well, happy rest of the Friday.
Thank you. Yeah.
And
Have a good weekend. Storm free.
storm
Oh,
free. Yeah, Joburg dry winter. No storms anywhere.
lovely city. Yeah.
Pop it off there.